Welcome to Data-Driven Sports Betting. I'm A-Train Bets and I use my brain to make bets. In this video, we're going to go through a strategy that we've identified on using Caesars as a sharp book and finding some plays that are in limited markets on pretty heavy underdogs that we see some consistent representation from FanDuel as higher payouts than they should be. And we're going to talk a little bit about why we think this is a viable strategy, what evidence we have that the strategy seems to be working, and what we plan on doing with it as we move forward. So this is an example of a time where I found something that I've started to pull on a thread and said, you know, there might be something here. There might be something here. Let's start betting on it. Let's start testing it. Let's tag it. We'll show you how we do that with A-Train Station. But I also want you to be thinking about, how do you find edges like this yourself? So this is a good specific play that you might want to look at, but it's also something that shows you this kind of process of developing your own sharp strategies, which I think are equally important. So we're not going to cover in this sharp strategies video, we're only going to cover this one thing, but we're going to talk about it with some depth because we think it's something that is very useful for you to know. What we're going to do first, let's go over to our station view. We're going to look at the weightings that we're using right now. So I've for a while, I was starting off, and you know, these are weightings that you decide to use for yourself for a period of betting. You can change these, and we're going to give you, eventually, we're going to give you the ability to save some of these settings so that you can start using different book weightings, because this is ultimately like, where do you put the spotlights to illuminate the statue? So if you think of any bet or any opportunity, any strategy, like it's a statue in a museum. And if you are tasked with illuminating it perfectly, so anybody, wherever they are, can see this in perfect lighting, how do you do that? In the case of betting, it's with our weightings. So with our weightings, with the book sharpness weightings, we're looking at how do we add all of these little lights around the bet to fully illuminate it for truth. What is the truth behind this bet? And what we found is traditionally we've used, at minimum, BetOnline and Pinnacle as the sharpest books in the market. In this case, we're going to put them at a 3. We're also going to add Caesars in, because when we were working with the BetOnline and Pinnacle strategy, we noticed that Caesars often did better than the other books we were looking at. And as we looked into it, even though I have nothing but bad things to say about Caesars' website, I also think they're greedy. I don't think they keep up their properties well. But you know what? They seem to be pretty good at setting odds. Like, they will be helpful in helping us assess what is market truth. And that's what we want to do here. So what we're going to do is we're going to cast a wide net, because what we're looking for are the plays. So you set book weightings to cast that illumination, but you're not just casting illumination on one statue, you're casting illumination on every single statue. It's like each statue rotates in, like, what do we think about this statue? This statue's garbage. Train's kids made that. No. What do you think about this statue? Oh, that's a Picasso. That one's definitely one you want to bet on. Okay, next. And that's the thing. It's like this system where you have this illumination. If you can illuminate everything the right way, then we understand we can make that decision about the bet very quickly. So that's what we're doing here. So what I've done is I've adapted our default weightings to have what I think right now, today, in this moment, is the best reflection of truth that we can have, right? So these change almost every day. I'm changing these constantly. I want you to do the same thing. Eventually, we're going to try to quantify these a little bit more, but we're not quite there yet. This way, you can have as much illumination as possible. And what I found with the BetOnline and Pinnacle strategy, we were kind of casting a very narrow prospect. It was like our net was small. We weren't getting a lot of things in the net. Now we're casting a much bigger net. We're going to get a lot of garbage in this net, but we're also going to get a lot of fish. That's what led us to understanding the Caesar strategy that we're going to talk about today. A lot of different books, a lot of standard one weightings, a few with extra sharp weightings. And the whole goal with your weighting settings is to prospect. Find potential plays, and then analyze them deeply when you get to our bet market details screen. So here's the bet market details screen for one example of this. And this is a very classic example of what we're seeing. So let's break down this play. It's college basketball. This is where we're seeing a lot of these. College basketball is notorious for being a couple things. One, there's a whole lot of them and the markets are pretty thin. Second, it's freaking college basketball. Nobody knows what's going to happen in any of these games. That volatility, really good for us, right? We don't know what's going to happen in a college basketball game. So what does that mean? We want to, as sharp bettors, generally be betting opposite of what the public's going to do. And we know the public is going to trend towards favorites and underdogs, but they also are not going to be looking to play wide, disparate plays. So what we have in this case is a good example. We got Southeast Louisiana Lions and Houston Baptist Huskies, not top 10 programs by any stretch, But what we have is we have Caesars, who we've talked about already, has pretty good ability to set decent lines a lot of the time. They have a high hold. This is something to also notice. They have a high hold a lot of the time. Caesars almost always has a 7% hold. They're not using hold to determine how confident they are about anything. They're just greedy. So keep that in mind. They're greedy. Don't overreact to the hold. Okay, so there's that. Secondly, when we see Caesars' numbers, and this pattern we're seeing over and over again, we're going to see it on the border. So something that has a bigger than the main market spread. In this case, you can see Southeast Louisiana Lions. Yeah, they're a favorite, but they're not like a 5x favorite. They're like a 1.4x favorite or something. We should expect the Southeast Louisiana Lions to go -9.5 about 32% of the time based on what Caesars is telling us, especially, although we are actually factoring in FanDuel and DraftKings into our calculation as well. So if we go to Caesars alone, you can see this gets even better. So if Caesars alone, it's a 206, which gives us a 32.6% likelihood of winning. On this plus 235, we're getting paid out way better than a 32% likelihood of winning. So there's where we see, okay, FanDuel has given us such good odds here, especially, I mean, look at DraftKings. They're right here. They're right by Caesars. They just have a little bit of a lower hold. But DraftKings is like, hey, we'll take action at 238. They're only 3 points off of a total offset bet. This is almost an arbitrage play. So somewhere we've got EV, and we think it's at FanDuel. Right? So we've got, the Southeast Louisiana Lions, they're not going to win this most of the time, but they're going to win it enough based on everything we can tell, based on what Caesars is saying, that this is a really strong play. And that's exactly how we break it down. So we see, I mean, look at this, 51 points difference to the next best line. That's enormous. FanDuel's algorithm has it so that these edge cases are getting too much on the payout. We think there's an advantage here. This kind of thing in a limited market and a known volatile sport, this is the kind of sharp play you want to hammer. This is the kind of sharp play you're like, yeah, let's go. And we're seeing this with harder college basketball season. We're seeing this all the time. Seeing dozens of these every day, right? So this is something that if you key off of, if you believe the hypothesis, then you're going to want to make some of these plays. Okay, let's look at another example. So here's Texas A&M CC Islanders against Texas A&M Commerce Lions, which are apparently two different teams. They are going to play, and you see a very similar kind of deal, right? Once again, only FanDuel, DraftKings, and Caesars are offering this line off the main market. The main market line you can see here is -3 or +3, and we're adding another 5.5 points to that. In college basketball, that may not be that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. But in this case, we're seeing same situation here. Only 3 points differential, but you're seeing, again, 55 points between FanDuel and the next best line in the market. This is a number that's just too generous, and they're taking too much from the public on the favorite so they can afford this. This is a hedge for FanDuel. FanDuel's probably doing this super intentionally. They're like, you know what? Let's make all the public pay a whole lot more on this favorite here, and we'll give a little bit of extra kick on the back end because we could use the risk management. That to me is the story I'm seeing. And again, you see Caesars, again, high hold. Don't worry about that. They're just greedy. And I love when I see this too. FanDuel's an outlier, and you see DraftKings and Caesars showing very similar lines, just with a little bit of a different hold percentage. But you see them come together and you're like, okay, that's great. Again, if we go to Caesars alone, that number even gets better because we're not factoring in FanDuel as 1/5 of this market truth. So again, look at it from multiple different points of view. Even in a thin market like this, you could find this edge that you're like, wow, all you have to believe is Caesars sharper than FanDuel on setting lines. I would hope you would believe that. Second, is this actual outcome going to happen more than 32.4% of the time? Because if it is, this payout's going to make us money. That's it. So if this wins a third of the time or better, we're making money. So based on what we're seeing here, FanDuel doesn't think it's going to come anywhere close to this. Caesars by themselves think this is going to be over here, and it's going to be a total 33%. So even in a combined market, if we beat this number by anything, and we've got a lot of wiggle room here. So if it's plus 235, it really should be plus 215. He's got 20 points of value. That's huge. That's huge. So keep that in mind as you're looking at this. These numbers are just too good to pass up. And so the way we've been tracking this, and this is the important thing. So the strategy is what it is, right? The strategy is here's an opportunity based on how we're reading a market, based on the weightings that we've cast this net, and we see this pattern. Yes, the math looks good. The illumination looks pretty good, but we only have 3 points of light between FanDuel, DraftKings, and Caesars. This is not a soccer goals play that has 50 different lines to it. This has got 3. So we know there's some uncertainty in this market, but the advantage is so high that if this is a viable play, we should make a good amount of money long-term on this. And there's going to be a lot of variance because these are all significant underdog plays. And we're not even catching the highest EV because we cap this at a plus 250 for the no vig odds. So if you don't know what that means, watch some of the other videos. But basically what we're saying is when we set our filter criteria with a max odds of plus 250, our no vig odds has to be within that minus 250 to plus 250 range, because if it gets to heavier underdogs or favorites, then we know that devigging methodologies start to break down. The likelihood of these very rare occurrences start to come into play. So we're kind of on that border. So it's worth noting, how often do we win this? Well, the way we can check that, and the way we're starting to analyze this, is a couple ways. So if we go in to our wager history at A-Train Station, now this is fairly new feature set, and we're going to be building out a lot more calculations and algorithms and whatever, but it's what we're working with today. But you can see, so what we want to key off of here, so our no vig closing line, so this is the percentage and this is the odds. This is what I placed it at, and then this is what the results were. But what we found is when I bet this at plus 250, we calculated the no vig line to be plus 235. But the reality was at close, this line closed at plus 207, which means we got 43 points of closing line value, or 13% on that closing line. That is one of the best plays we had all day. And you could see multiple times we had better closing line value than what even we thought when we were analyzing it. That's a pattern you like to see. You know, some of them, they were pretty close. This one's huge, and we won this bet. Look, we got plus 235 on this. When at close, this should have been 174. That's an enormous play, and we won that bet. You can see on that strategy. So all I've been doing is I've been tagging the ones that we've played based on the strategy that I just explained. I've been betting them all at about 40 bucks because they're all in the kind of plus 200 range. So I'm like, oh, we're just going to not worry about sizing this perfectly. We just want to kind of get a gauge. And I really believe that if you have a hypothesis that you think is going to be worth betting on, bet it, test it, bet small amounts. For me, $40 is a pretty nominal amount, and I'm willing to do that to gather data on whether or not the strategy is effective. And the strategy will go away like all strategies over time. But if you're thinking about it and finding things with the data, this allows you to explore and find new strategies too. That's the whole point. Can you play this strategy? Absolutely. But can you play another strategy that you can find by casting a wide net with the data and doing some analysis and seeing the patterns and having a hypothesis and looking at all of that? Absolutely. That's how this whole thing works. So that's what we want you to do. But you look at this and like, this closing line value performance is fantastic. This one wasn't, but that wasn't even on this strategy. On this one too, another 3%. Yeah, we thought it was going to be 6%, but we'll take 3% any day. Any day. Our target for these CLV metrics is 2%, 2 to 3%. And a lot of these, we are crushing this. Here's one we lost. Fine. We lost 1 on closing line, and that was only down 3%. This one, same game, up 15%. If you had these 2 bets every day, would you want them? Yep. Yep. Every day you would want this. Look at that closing line. Awesome. So that is the kind of thing that we're doing here with these plays. Here's one we won a couple in the Memphis game, right? And they're gonna clump together, but we're winning enough of them. When you're winning at plus 235, that $40 bet, you win $94. You win more than twice what you bet. So we don't need to win a majority of this. We just need to win enough to overcome that likelihood. So it is so powerful. If this math continues to go this way and we're consistently getting higher CLV than our no vig odds would have suggested, I mean, this is a dream. This is a dream. So yeah, love what we're seeing on these. And this is where we can look at our results to understand, hey, this is what it's looking very, very good on this particular strategy, but you can do this with any strategy. You can just add in a note and tag it. Like all I'm doing is when I go in here, I'm like, I bet, and I would write, you know, Caesar's test. I just write Caesar's test. And so then when I save that, it's going to just show up in my list for that day, and it's going to be tagged with this yellow tag, and we'll be able to see, okay, this is what's going on. So you can start to look at different strategies. You use different book weightings. You can use all this stuff, and you can develop the strategy for you. So from today's video, be willing to try new strategies, be willing to try new book weightings, prospect different places. What happens when you're fishing, right? What happens when you're fishing? You fish for a while in one spot. Fish ain't biting. What do? You go to a different spot. Change your book weightings. That's all you got to do. Change your book weightings, look at it a little bit differently, see if you can find something else. Adjust some of your filter settings, explore, hypothesize. By hypothesize, I mean, can you come up with a way that you think you might have an edge in this market? Do you see something in the data that says, hey, this book is off on something, or that we see a way that we might be able to get an edge on making these plays? Expand on it. You look at it, you start to compile data like we do with these Caesar's test tagging entries, and we're looking at them each day. We're saying, okay, look at that closing line value. That's great. So those are the kinds of things that I want you thinking about in your own strategy. You can play this strategy too, but this is what A-Train Station does. It allows you to find these things. And the tools we have today are very powerful, but we're every day working to build even more tools, to find more strategies, to find better plays, to make those plays, and then to evaluate them and make the strategies better. It's that cycle that you have to have if you want to be a sharp sports bettor, because that is what will allow you to continue to evolve your game as the world of sports betting evolves around you. That is the power of A Train Station, and we're excited about it because we're now here. We're live, we're taking members, and we are having great results. If you use some data, if you use some math, you use some analysis, use the right tool, you can have so much more enjoyable and profitable experience sports betting. I don't know why anybody wouldn't do it. And with that, this train is leaving the station. Until next time, save the units for the bros and do your betting like the pros.